There is a cat sitting in a window. It has been sitting in this window for 3 hours. Not sleeping, sitting, watching. Its head moves in small, precise increments, tracking something outside that is either a bird, a leaf, or a piece of garbage bag caught on a fence that the wind is moving in a way the cat finds morally unacceptable. Its tail is doing the slow, deliberate thing that cat tails do when the cat is engaged with something it cannot reach. Its pupils have gone from their normal elliptical shape to the rounder configuration that pupil dilation produces when the visual system is running at elevated capacity. This cat has not been outside in 4 years. It was born in a house, spent its first weeks in that house, and has remained in that house without interruption across what is, in relative terms, a significant portion of its expected lifespan. It has never been rained on. It has never been in a fight. It has never caught anything that was not a toy on a string being operated by a human who was simultaneously watching television. It has never made any decision with meaningful consequences for its own survival. And it is sitting in that window watching that possibly garbage bag with the specific quality of attention that its nervous system deploys for genuine hunting targets, because its nervous system does not know that the glass between it and the thing it is watching is one of many reasons it will never actually catch that thing, and because 4 million years of Felidae evolutionary history did not consult the indoor cat's living arrangements before installing the behavioral and neurological architecture that the cat is currently running. The question of what happens to a cat kept indoors permanently is the question of what happens when an evolutionary lineage built for specific ecological conditions encounters a set of conditions that those adaptations were not designed for. The answer involves behavioral science, evolutionary biology, cognitive neuroscience, the ancient human relationship with cats, and some information about what cats are actually doing in those windows that most cat owners have never fully considered. Start with what cats actually are at the evolutionary baseline, because understanding the cat indoors requires understanding the cat that evolution produced before humans started keeping them in apartments. The domestic cat descends from the Near Eastern wildcat Felis sylvestris libica, a small solitary felid whose ecology was defined by several specific characteristics. Solitary hunting of small prey in a defined home range, territorial organization in which specific geographic areas were maintained and defended, continuous environmental monitoring through a sensory system, particularly olfactory and auditory, calibrated to detect prey and threats at distances and sensory modalities that human perception does not cover. A behavioral routine organized around hunting cycles that integrated activity and rest in patterns driven by prey availability rather than arbitrary schedules. The specific cognitive and behavioral capabilities that this ecology produced were not generic predator capabilities. They were specifically calibrated to the demands of solitary small prey hunting in a complex, sensory-rich natural environment. The olfactory system was built to process the thousands of chemical signals present in a natural landscape. The auditory system was built to localize sounds in 3 dimensions across a wide frequency range, including ultrasonic frequencies that mouse vocalizations fall in. The visual system was built for motion detection in low-light conditions. The territorial cognition was built to maintain and update a detailed spatial map of a home range across seasons and years. All of this, every component of the cat's remarkable sensory and cognitive architecture, was built for the outside world, the natural world, the world of variable terrain, changing weather, complex chemical environments, and the continuous, unpredictable novelty that wild habitats produce. An apartment is not that world, and the cat's nervous system does not stop being built for that world just because the cat has never experienced it. The most fundamental thing that happens to an indoor-only cat is understimulation of sensory systems that are calibrated for a much richer input environment than modern indoor spaces provide. The cat's olfactory system is extraordinary by human standards. Cats have approximately 200 million olfactory receptor cells, compared to the human's approximately 5 million. And the olfactory bulb in the cat brain, relative to total brain size, is substantially larger than the equivalent structure in the human brain. This is a sensory system that evolved to process the chemical complexity of outdoor environments, the thousands of volatile organic compounds from plants, soil, other animals, weather changes, and the constantly shifting chemosensory landscape of a living ecosystem. An indoor environment presents this system with a dramatically impoverished chemical landscape. The same furniture, the same people, the same food, the same cleaning products, the same everything, day after day, with minimal variation, and without the continuous novelty that the system was built to process. The olfactory system is running, continuously, in an environment that gives it very little to do. The auditory system faces a similar situation. The cat's hearing range extends from approximately 48 Hz to approximately 79,000 Hz, one of the broadest hearing ranges of any mammal. This range evolved specifically to allow cats to detect and localize the ultrasonic vocalizations of rodent prey, sounds that fall in frequency ranges that human hearing does not register at all. In an indoor environment, the ultrasonic range of the cat's hearing is processing predominantly electronic equipment emissions, the specific high-frequency outputs of televisions, computers, and household electronics, rather than the biological sounds it evolved to interpret. What happens neurologically when a sensory system with high processing capability receives persistently impoverished input is well documented in neuroscience. Sensory systems maintain their structure through use. Reduced input leads to reduced activity in the associated neural circuits, which over time leads to specific structural changes. Reduced synaptic density, reduced neural connectivity in the circuits that process the understimulated sensory modalities. The system adapts to the input it receives, and if that input is persistently lower than what the system was built for, the adaptation involves structural reduction. This is happening at a cellular level in cats kept in insufficiently stimulating indoor environments. The behavioral consequences of this understimulation are visible and well documented, though they are often misinterpreted by cat owners who observe them. Compulsive behaviors, repetitive, stereotyped behaviors that serve no immediate functional purpose, are one of the most documented consequences of chronic understimulation in captive felids. In large wild felids in zoo environments with insufficient enrichment, these behaviors typically involve repetitive pacing. In domestic cats, in insufficiently stimulating indoor environments, the equivalent behaviors include repetitive overgrooming, excessive vocalization without apparent cause, and repetitive play-like behaviors that escalate in intensity in ways that resemble displacement activity rather than functional play. The overgrooming case is particularly interesting because it is both common and often misattributed by owners to skin problems, allergies, or other dermatological causes. Cats that overgroom to the point of producing bald patches or skin lesions are frequently brought to veterinary attention for dermatological evaluation when the underlying cause is behavioral, specifically the deployment of grooming as a self-soothing behavior in response to chronic stress or understimulation. The grooming system is the cat's primary self-regulatory mechanism, and when it is deployed compulsively, it is often a signal that the cat's nervous system is seeking regulation that the environment is not providing. Heightened reactivity to minor stimuli is another behavioral consequence of chronic understimulation. A cat whose environment provides minimal novel sensory input becomes sensitized to the stimuli that do occur: the sound of a door, the movement of a person across the room, the sudden noise of something dropping, in ways that produce exaggerated startle responses and prolonged return to baseline. The baseline alert level elevates because the nervous system, deprived of the continuous low-level novel input that a rich environment provides, calibrates its alert threshold upward to compensate for the impoverished input landscape. The predatory system requires separate and extended discussion because it is the behavioral system most fundamentally incompatible with the indoor environment and the one whose frustration has the most significant consequences for indoor cat welfare. Cats are obligate carnivores whose behavioral repertoire is organized around the predatory sequence: stalk, chase, catch, kill, consume. This sequence is not a discrete behavior triggered by hunger. It is a continuous motivational system that drives behavior even in fully fed animals because it evolved in an environment where the sequence had to be executed many times to produce adequate caloric intake. Wild cats are estimated to make approximately 20 to 40 hunting attempts for every successful catch. The behavioral drive for the sequence must therefore be strong enough to sustain 20 to 40 attempts between successes, meaning it operates at a motivational intensity that is largely decoupled from immediate caloric need. This predatory drive does not diminish in indoor cats because they are fed. It remains active at approximately the intensity that the evolutionary history of the felid family installed it. The cat that has been fed premium kibble at regular intervals is still running a predatory motivation system that evolved for an animal catching multiple small prey items per day through repeated, often unsuccessful hunting attempts. In the indoor environment, this system has nowhere to go. The prey that would provide the consummatory experience, the actual catch, kill, consume completion of the predatory sequence, is not present. Toy play provides the stalk and chase components with varying degrees of adequacy, but most indoor cats do not receive toy play at the frequency or the duration that adequately satisfies the predatory drive. The system runs continuously without reaching completion, which is a specific motivational state that behavioral science associates with frustration and the specific stress responses that motivational frustration produces. The window watching that the cat in the opening scenario is doing is predatory system engagement without possibility of completion. The cat is in the stalk phase, the initial orienting and targeting behavior, locked there by the glass that prevents any progression to chase. This state can be maintained for hours because the predatory motivational system is self-sustaining during the stalk phase, waiting for the chase trigger that environmental contingencies will, in the indoor cat's case, never provide. Bring in the ancient context, because the cat's evolutionary situation did not begin with modern apartments. It began with ancient human settlements 10,000 years ago, and understanding what the original domestication context provided, and what it did not take away, is essential for understanding what the fully indoor cat loses. When wildcats first began associating with ancient human settlements in the Fertile Crescent, they were not entering anything like a modern indoor environment. They were entering the periphery of human settlements, outdoor spaces that were, from the cat's ecological perspective, simply a specific type of habitat within their home range. The settlement periphery offered reliable, high-density prey access in the form of the rodent communities that human grain stores attracted. Combined with the secondary benefits of fire proximity and organized human activity that deterred many large predators. But the cats remained in a sensory environment that was, by every relevant measure, continuous with the natural world. They were outdoors. They were exposed to weather variation, to the chemical complexity of natural and semi-natural environments, to the acoustic landscape of a living settlement embedded in natural surroundings. They were hunting real prey, completing the predatory sequence, maintaining territorial boundaries through real spatial navigation of real geographic areas. The ancient domestication process changed the cat's behavioral orientation toward humans, producing reduced stress reactivity to human proximity, increased tolerance of close human contact, and eventually the specific affiliative behaviors that characterize modern domestic cats. What it did not change was the cat's sensory and behavioral architecture for existing in an outdoor sensory environment. The 10,000-year domestication of cats modified their social behaviors while leaving their ecological behavioral systems substantially intact. This is fundamentally different from what happened to dogs during domestication. Dog domestication involved strong selection for behavioral traits that specifically reduced autonomous ecological capability in exchange for human orientation. Cat domestication involved much weaker selection pressure on the non-social behavioral systems, hunting capability, territorial behavior, sensory processing, autonomous problem solving, leaving these systems closer to the wildcat baseline than equivalent systems in dogs are to the wolf baseline. The practical consequence: a cat placed in an indoor-only environment is an animal whose social behavioral systems have been modified for human proximity, but whose ecological behavioral systems are still largely calibrated for the natural outdoor environment that the ancestral wildcat inhabited. The modern indoor cat is, in a specific sense, a wild animal in a domesticated social package. The territorial system is another area where the indoor-only situation creates specific challenges that are worth examining directly. Cats are territorial in a specific and cognitively demanding way. Their home range management involves maintaining detailed spatial maps of their territory through continuous physical navigation, updating those maps in response to the presence and absence of other cats, managing territorial boundaries through scent marking and physical patrolling, and integrating all of this territorial information with prey distribution, shelter availability, and safety assessment. The spatial scale of this territorial system in outdoor cats varies considerably. but typical home ranges for outdoor domestic cats are in the range of several hectares for females and substantially larger for males, areas measured in tens of thousands of square meters. An indoor apartment provides living space measured in tens or hundreds of square meters. The territorial system of a cat adapted for a home range of several hectares is running in an environment that provides approximately 1% of the space that system evolved to manage. The spatial navigation and territorial maintenance behaviors that the system generates, the patrolling, the marking, the boundary checking, are executed in an environment too small to meaningfully absorb them. By the way, if you want to go even deeper into the secret lives of ancient humans, I just launched a full course called The Secret Lives of Ancient Humans. 10 modules, 3+ hours of content covering everything we never talk about on YouTube. What they feared, how they communicated, what hunted them, and much more. Plus an exclusive PDF guide included. Link in the description. See you inside. This spatial mismatch is not merely inconvenient. The territorial system is linked to the stress regulation system through specific hormonal pathways. Cortisol dynamics in felids are partly regulated by territorial status and territorial security. Cats that cannot maintain adequate territorial domains show elevated chronic cortisol levels compared to cats with access to adequate spatial ranges. Chronic elevated cortisol has the same downstream health consequences in cats that it has in any mammal: impaired immune function, accelerated aging of specific tissues, behavioral dysregulation, and in severe cases the specific physiological sequelae of chronic stress exposure. Here is the dimension of this topic that most discussions avoid: the specific health consequences that distinguish indoor-only cats from cats with outdoor access. Obesity is substantially more prevalent in indoor-only cats than in cats with outdoor access. This is partly explained by reduced caloric expenditure in a smaller, less stimulating environment, and partly by the specific relationship between predatory drive satisfaction and food intake regulation. Cats in environments that allow hunting or hunting equivalent play at adequate frequency show better caloric self-regulation than cats in environments that leave the predatory drive chronically unsatisfied. The frustration of the predatory system appears to be connected to dysregulated eating behavior in ways that the specific neurochemistry of predatory motivation would predict. Idiopathic cystitis, a stress-related inflammatory condition of the bladder that produces painful urination and in severe cases urinary obstruction, is significantly more prevalent in indoor cats than in outdoor cats. The condition is directly associated with chronic stress and appears to be specifically related to the environmental conditions of indoor confinement in ways that make it a marker of inadequate environmental enrichment in the indoor cat population. Feline hyperesthesia syndrome, a condition producing rolling skin, excessive grooming, apparent sensitivity to being touched along the back, and in some cases aggressive reactions to stimuli, appears at elevated rates in indoor-only cats and is associated with inadequate environmental stimulation. The syndrome is essentially a behavioral condition expressing as an apparent neurological one, and its connection to environmental inadequacy is well established in veterinary behavioral medicine. These are not minor quality of life issues. They are serious health consequences of the specific mismatch between the cat's evolutionary architecture and the indoor-only environment. The obvious question at this point is, then why keep cats indoors at all? The answer involves a genuine ecological tension that does not resolve cleanly in favor of either the cat's welfare or conservation concerns. Outdoor cats kill wildlife. This is documented, the numbers are significant, and in areas with vulnerable bird and small mammal populations, the predatory impact of outdoor domestic cats on local wildlife communities is a real conservation concern. The predatory capability that makes cats suffer in its frustration when they cannot use it is also the capability that makes outdoor cats significant predators of native wildlife. The tension between the cat's behavioral and welfare needs for outdoor access, and the ecological impact of providing that access is the specific problem that discussions of indoor cat welfare cannot avoid. The indoor-only cat suffers specific welfare consequences from confinement. The outdoor cat imposes specific ecological consequences on native wildlife. Neither outcome is without cost. The ancient context is instructive here. In the original ancient settlement context, the specific prey community that attracted and sustained the wildcat population associated with human settlements was primarily the commensal rodent community, mice and rats that were themselves invasive presences in the human settlement context. The cat's predatory impact in the ancient settlement context was operating on a prey community that was itself anthropogenically introduced rather than native. This ecological context is genuinely different from the modern situation in which domestic cats operate as introduced predators on native wildlife communities that did not evolve with felid predation pressure. The ancient cat-human relationship was ecologically coherent in a way that the modern relationship, transplanted to different continents and different ecological contexts, is not. Here is the full picture of what happens to a cat kept indoors permanently. The sensory systems progressively experience input impoverishment relative to their calibrated capacity, with neurological adaptation consequences that follow from reduced input chronic states. The predatory behavioral system runs continuously without achieving completion, producing chronic motivational frustration with its associated behavioral and physiological consequences. The territorial system operates in spatially inadequate conditions, producing chronic cortisol elevation with its associated immune, behavioral, and health consequences. The specific health conditions associated with indoor-only confinement appear at elevated rates compared to cats with outdoor access. The cat in the window is not comfortable. It is not content in the specific sense of an animal whose behavioral needs are being met. It is, in a very specific behavioral sciences sense, frustrated, running behavioral systems that require specific inputs and outputs that its environment is not providing, adapting in the ways available to it, expressing that adaptation through the behavioral signatures of chronic understimulation and motivational frustration. The window is the summary of the entire situation. Everything the cat needs is visible through the glass. The olfactory complexity, the spatial scale, the prey community, the territorial range, the sensory richness of an outdoor environment, all of it. Continuously visible, continuously triggering the behavioral systems built to engage with it, continuously prevented from actual engagement by a pane of glass that the cat has probably tried to get through approximately 4,000 times and will try again tomorrow. The ancient humans who first shared their settlements with wild cats were not keeping those cats. The cats were choosing proximity. They could leave whenever the assessment of the cost-benefit relationship shifted unfavorably. The specific freedom that defined the original relationship, the cat's choice to be there, is exactly what the indoor-only arrangement removes. This does not make indoor cats universally worse off than outdoor cats. The specific risks of outdoor life, traffic, predation, disease, conflict with other cats, are real and significant. The comparison is not between a suffering indoor cat and a flourishing outdoor cat. It is between two different sets of costs and benefits, neither of which is trivially preferable. What it does mean is that the indoor cat's window watching is not a quirky behavioral preference. It is an evolutionary conversation between a nervous system built for the outside world and an environment that keeps that world on the other side of the glass. The cat is not watching because it finds the view pleasant. The cat is watching because everything it is built to be is out there.